I was a product of the 60s, so I graduated high school in 1969, and most women in that day were either secretaries or nurses or housewife, mother. I didn't really want to be secretary, nurse. So I went to the local college and I found out I knew a little bit about x-ray, so I thought, hospital work sounds right to me, I'll get into the x-ray program. So they didn't have any seats left. I was too late coming out. So they asked me would I be interested in lab technology. I had no idea what lab technology was all about. So they sort of gave me a quick rundown about the science and the investigative side of it and the biology and the chemistry, and I thought, sounds like something I'd be interested in. So I signed up.
I happened to have my kidney removed at the Royal Cornwall Infirmary, and while I was recovering, my sister, who worked also in the hospital, mentioned they needed a lab boy, that's the way things were in those days, to look after the guinea pigs and rabbits. Two of my older brothers and one of my elder sisters were both in the services. It was wartime. Here I am, 14 years old. My father had died a year before. Our business had been destroyed in the bombing in London, and every penny was going to be valuable. So I said, right, I'll go to work.
Probably say I decided to become an MLT because, you know, I looked it up in this magazine or whatever, but no, I wasn't 18, so I couldn't become a nurse. I thought, well, so what am I going to do? And my dad said, well, here's an ad for medical laboratory technology. Maybe that would be interesting.
We had a field trip to St. Clair's Mercy Hospital here in St. John's, and to go see the lab. And so we went there. We spent, I think, about a couple of hours there. And I was fascinated by it. It just seemed to be like a really interesting kind of field. And that was grade 6. And that's what I finished high school. I went straight to our trades college here and did the Med Lab Sciences program.
So I went to Regina to enlist, and I wanted to be in the medical corps. That's and I'd heard, you know, if you joined the army, there were opportunities to get advancements.
I decided to become an MLT because I'd always been interested in medicine and science, even as a child. I was the one that, you know, watched Star Trek and all the science fiction television and movies. When I was in grade 9, we had to do a project on a career that we might be interested in. And in sorting through the documentation, I found a pamphlet on medical laboratory technology. And as I researched that, I got hooked. And it was from that time that I knew that I wanted to progress into that career, and I did.
I had originally started in the lab in biological sciences, and I was the second graduating class in Canada, and we were doing work with the military in defense research, and I started doing testing on human samples and sort of got into the idea that maybe I'd like to be a lab tech and work in the medical side of things. So I went back and did my subject RT in microbiology.
Well, when I was in grade 12 and finishing up, I wanted to go to med school, become a doctor. But we just couldn't afford it. My parents were on the farm. And my high school teacher, sensing my strengths in the sciences, suggested that I maybe try something called medical laboratory technology, which he'd heard about, but really didn't know much about.
And I asked, could you send me on a lab course? And they did. They sent me on a lab course to Toronto on a lab course. You know how long the lab course was? 3 months.
And I always had to know how things worked. And I still had all these altruistic thoughts about what I wanted to do with my life, and she suggested that I investigate lab technology. It was the perfect fit, and I was extremely happy through my whole career.
And ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a scientist. So the lab coat and the shoes fit the picture.
A friend had made arrangements to go to the local hospital to do a tour of their training program, and she thought that might be something she would be interested in, but she didn't want to go alone. So she invited me to go along, so we took the day from school and off we went and visited the hospital. And she was totally grossed out by it. And I thought it was the most fascinating thing I had ever seen. And I thought, this is it.
I'm one of those lucky people who fell into the perfect job for herself.
Glad I wasn't 18.
You'd have been a nurse.
Yes, I'd have been a nurse.